thought I would start with a question I thought of after last meeting. I felt that this was touched on, but I didn't feel it was really settled. It's well known that population growth is slowest in the richest and most highly developed nations. Why shouldn't it work, therefore, to pursue the advancement of poorer nations, where most of the growth occurs, to our level of wealth and development? I wouldn't put that in too abstract terms. This is something that comes up in every group, whether I'm talking about population or not. And it is, what is the problem? Everyone is advancing toward our level. Everybody is getting there. And so why can't we just wait until everyone finally reaches our level of affluence? And I know that Dr. Thornhill has the answer for us.
We'll put time on the x-axis, and on the y-axis it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be birth rates or death rates, and I'll label which lines are which in a minute, but let's just put birth or death rates. And I could just do this. I'll put birth rates in blue and death rates in black so we can just keep them straight when we actually start to draw the graphs. When a population is very small and not growing, or very large and not growing, birth rates and death rates are roughly equivalent, so that there's no net change in the population size. So if we were to start out with a very high birth rate and a very high death rate, which is the case in what we would call an underdeveloped country, there is no real net change of population size. The birth rates are very high, the death rates are very high, but the population stays more or less stable. And this was the case for the first, millions and millions of years of human existence, as it is with most animals and plants on the planet. Most animals and plants that are born do not survive and reproduce. Only a selected group do of any given species. When at some point in our benevolence, if we want to continue with the examples we were using last time, we move into an area and say, well, what these people really need is better medical care. That's always the first thing that we bring in, is we teach them how to use Occidental medicine. We teach them how to fight infections. We give them penicillin. This is the easy stuff, and that's the stuff we bring in first. We teach them how to be more hygienic. We teach them how to avoid dysentery. It is the case that diarrhea is the #1 killer in developing and underdeveloped countries, and so we teach people how to avoid that. I mean, that's a nice thing to do, right? Well, as a result of doing that, so this red dot is basically where we introduce health care. We'll just call it health improvement, because we're doing various things. It's not necessarily only health care. As a result, death rates drop dramatically and then begin to level off at some new place. But all of the social issues and all of the economic development that takes place in a country that begins to slow down the birth rates happens well after all of the health improvements are brought into a country. And so there's a long time lag between the time that health improvements are made and the time when the birth rates start to decline. And so what you have is birth rates staying very high for a long time and then beginning to drop and then starting to level off again. Somewhere around the same level as the death rates. And so once again, the population is not growing. So at this end of the spectrum, you have a net change of 0, or what we would call ZPG, zero population growth, and up at this end, you have ZPG. It's this interim that's the problem. This, between here and here, this whole block of time is where population growth is occurring. And if this is a substantial amount of time, there's a lot of opportunity for the population to get very large before all of these third level processes that we mentioned before begin to have an effect on the birth rates and begin to bring the birth rates down. People begin to pursue other interests besides just having children. They don't need as many children to run the farm. All their children are surviving. They don't need to continue to have lots and lots of children. They're able to automate their farms. They're able to hire professionals to do some of the work for them. They don't have to have a child who can maintain all the machinery because they can hire someone else to come in and do that for them, because the infrastructure of the community, of the society, is developing such that those jobs are taken care of by people other than your own children, than your own immediate family. And so down here at this red dot, all of those social mechanisms are in place. From here to here, those social mechanisms are developing. And many of them do not develop until well after the death rates begin to drop. And so you get this net growth of population when the birth rates far exceed the death rates. And that's the problem. So yes, if everyone had all of these social structures in place, we would be back at zero population growth. And yes, eventually, assuming the way we're going now, everyone will be there. But the amount of time that it takes between now and then for any given country that's on this path means population growth. And that's the real problem. The longer it takes to get all of those third level interactions in place so that the birth rates begin to drop, the larger the population will get within those borders. And of course, as the populations within those borders get larger and larger, they have to eat. And of course, they won't get larger and larger without the food. So as these death rates drop, there's a demand for more food. These people either have to grow it themselves or they have to get supplement from the outside. If we're supplementing their health care and then we see them starving, we're automatically going to start shipping food because it's obvious that that's the next health issue to deal with. And so by that time, we are already supplementing this population growth. So we are well into the dance. And the waltz has begun. And then there are all of these other issues that we talked about that perpetuate this, like expanding markets and things like that. So this is what's called the demographic trap in ecological terms. The trap is this middle part where you can hardly avoid it, is basically where the trap comes from. And the only way to avoid it is to bring those societal changes on the heels of, as quickly on the heels of the change in health as possible. With a smaller population, that's easy to do, but when the population is getting very large very quick, it's difficult to do.
And in our own, in North America, for example, the European population at the beginning of the 16th century was minute, of course. But as settlers came over, they experienced very high death rates, and they had tremendous families. Oftentimes not many of them surviving, but it was not uncommon for people to have 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 children. Not all of them survived, but it was very common to have huge families. Even 100 years ago, it was very common for people thought nothing of it to have 8 children, 6, 8, 10 children. And now it's be quite extraordinary. Now the average is very small. So in those 300 years, we went from 0 European population to 300 million. They were caught in the trap. I would have thought of the demographic trap as more referring to like a fish trap or something. It catches people. That's what happened in there, but I don't know. I think this is something that I learned from Dr. Thornhill the last time we went through population, and it made it very clear. I'm glad to have it down on tape so people can see it, follow it.
It seems to me that there's an ethical consideration here, though. We're sort of looking at, let's say, Africa or any other third world country. People there in poor health, not doing well. Aren't they as valuable as we are, and therefore aren't we obligated, if we have the resources, to give them the health care, which then we set this in motion? And I can see from a population growth perspective that this is not good. How do we balance between the ethical considerations, their value as human beings, assuming them equal to us? What do we do with that?
Well, again, I think that it's we have to decide whether we're going to be the gods of this planet or not, and whether everything that it is possible for us to do, we are therefore obliged to do. Because it is in our power to do that, it is possible for us to go in and create, in effect, a population crisis for these people. Is this benevolence? It is something that is in our power to do. But is this wise? Is this what kind of a God would do this to a population that has been going along for a very long time, tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years perhaps, and for us to come in and say, we're going to give you new standards, our standards of how people should live. Well, who appointed us exactly to be the monitor of the world and decide what the values are? And of course, the people at the time say, oh, of course, why wouldn't we accept these good things? But later on, when they are in crisis, then you have to say, well, exactly what was the favor that we did them? Are the people who are now starving to death, have we done them a favor by bringing them into the world to live in anguish? I certainly wouldn't want to make that choice myself. It is an ethical question, indeed.
So you would say, in a sense, we'd be like very well-meaning, but perhaps dumb gods to create more problems than we would be solving ultimately.
I would certainly say so myself. I think that, again, I would rather follow the example of God, and who lets things, has created a world with the gods who created a world where everything works, has been working for billions of years, everything balances out, it goes on, it succeeds, and God does not have to come in and rush food all over the place to feed hungry populations, or rush in doctors to cure diseases that occur in animals. These things are taken care of by natural selection. Creatures that are vulnerable to certain diseases die before they reproduce. Therefore, their proclivity towards succumbing to this disease is eliminated from the gene pool. Gradually, these diseases disappear from a population. And we said, no, we know better. We know better. That's the wrong way to do this. We know how to do this. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to run the world differently. Well, I am not convinced that we know how to run the world better than it has been run in the last 3 billion years. which is really the whole thrust of Ishmael and of all of my books.
One other aspect to this then, given what you just said, would it be possible for someone to draw the conclusion that you would be for getting rid of medicine? I mean, why cure our population from illnesses? Why not just let natural selection, natural processes create a stronger group of human beings or whatever?
I say in all of my books that there is no one right way for people to live, and I don't pretend to know the right way for people to live. And I think that is our particular arrogance, is to say, well, we know the one right way to live, and you are going to live our way. I don't say that the way we're living is wrong or wicked or evil or anything like that, but we have no grant, no one has appointed us to make us the arbiter of how everyone in the world should live. And there's certainly nothing wicked at all about medicine. And in fact, every lever peoples, every Aboriginal people, every primitive people have their own doctors, their own way, their own method of healing. Of course, we sneer at it. We say, "Oh, so it's all bunk. It's all baloney." They don't seem to think so, and they can't do some of the things that we can do. But they have a different orientation toward life and toward death. And death does not strike them as tragic, doesn't strike me as tragic, and I will not fight death the way that I see people in our culture fighting it. I don't want to live another hour or another week on machinery or things like that. Please God, you know. And so they don't live as long as we do, perhaps, and they do succumb to diseases that we don't. And if you want to be cured of those diseases, you should have the option to do it. I'm not saying you should be forbidden at all. I'm just saying that we really are not licensed to set ourselves up as the God of this world.
So you're saying that one of the first causes is like going to foreign countries and immunizing.
Well, it does produce this effect here. This is what happened in North Africa, for example, was that we helped them build up a population. When we went in, the population was tiny because the resources in that area are so small. And so, but they've been living, with those resources, and there were bad times just like there are now, periods of long drought, but it was not a disaster for them because they were small. And they could always eke out a living and keep going. But by building them up, we built them up for a crash and for a terrible experience that they're having now. And so people charge me and say, well, how can you possibly not keep all those people alive? Again, saying we are gods. Now, and the world is in our hands to say yes and no to who shall live and who shall die, and I will not. So when people say to me, will you let them die? I say, I don't let people die. I don't let people live. I am not God here. I'm really proposing a different attitude towards our powers. And one that people are not necessarily prepared for, because people do see that it is an act of benevolence on our part to bring these good things to people, but then we don't stick around to see the disaster that we create. We come in and we do our little good deeds, and then we go away. And then everyone says to me, as though it's my fault that they're having a famine there. Well, our benevolence put them in a position for them to suffer now. And all I'm saying is that if we if we go in and continue to support them, to keep them at that level, we can support them. We can keep them in a state of famine for a long time. And if that is your idea of benevolence, then I have to say, God bless you, but it's not mine. But I don't say, I don't forbid anybody from doing anything.
You proposed earlier, for example, if we all decided to stay in Houston and just live, for example, with the resources of Houston, that means then we really wouldn't be eating apples, because apples do not grow well in Houston.
Right. And we wouldn't be importing peaches from Chile in the off-season. We would have to survive on the resources that are natural to the area, that can survive in the area, and that would mean we'd have to get used to not having strawberries 12 months out of the year.
So, if we really were going to make this happen, what would you say would be the first steps that we could take?
Buy local.
Buy local, yeah.
Give the small farmers in the area a chance to survive to begin with.
Yeah. Also, initiate locally. This isn't something that we have to pass national legislation about. We shouldn't even think of doing such a thing, because if we were to try such a thing, we'd be fighting about it for the next 50 years. And we don't have 50 years to do this. But people can do things locally if they'll get together and if they understand this kind of thinking, and start from there and say, well, how could we work something out just in this little community here? I have suggested that the impetus for our food race is that the farmers get paid more, make more money, the more food they grow. It's obvious, and that we could eliminate that impetus to our food race if we said, no, we're not going to pay you for the amount you grow. We're going to pay you for the service of growing the food that we need. We're not saying grow less. We're saying we're not going to weigh it anymore. So it doesn't matter if you come here with 20 tons if we only need 10 tons. We're going to pay you for the food we need, not just for the sheer bulk of what you do. So what happens now is that the farmers grow the food, and of course it isn't needed in their area or within 1,000 miles, but it's needed somewhere, and so they ship it off to someplace else where we are using that food to fuel their population explosion.
But even a squirrel and lots of animals will save for the wintertime.
But they don't ship it off to another population that's starving
So
in
you're
order to
saying
keep that population from starving.
Okay. I'm just trying to imagine how we could implement something like this. I mean, we have a lot of jalapenos here.
Imagine, yeah. We would have the best beans and rice recipe books ever. The thing that might make it easier is if you imagine, and Daniel mentioned this earlier, that if you drew an imaginary line around Houston large enough that it could supply the food the food needed to support the people in Houston. And obviously, we're going to do without a lot of types of food that we've grown accustomed to. On the other hand, we're not going to go without beef. We will be one of those cities that don't go without beef, right? Other cities may have to go without beef, and they'll have to deal with that. We may not have ice cream, though. That would be a drag. Sorry.
We'll get the rest of it. Bluebell will be...
Oh, Bluebell's in there. Yes. Yeah. That's right. We have dairy farms. What am I thinking?
Yeah, what are you there?
Well, if you've drawn this imaginary line around Houston, what you've said to the farmers is, we will support you if you will support us, just us, within Houston. We will support you. You will not go hungry. You will not go needing if we don't go hungry and we don't go needing. And so what you're establishing here is a tribal relationship with your food providers. And what you need to start thinking about is, how do you establish tribal relationships with all those services that you need to survive? Food is one of those services we need to survive. So let's establish a tribal relationship with them. Instead of a monetary exchange, instead of paying for volume, and everything starts to change. Your perspective changes. It's no longer a problem that we're not producing a surplus of food. We could grow a surplus of food and we could store it for use in Houston when the farmers don't produce enough to meet the need. But we don't ship the excess out to some other location.
And we don't encourage the farmers to create a surplus to send out to another place. Because other people in this suggested format, other people wouldn't buy it.
For example, the situation. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No. So why not? What if they come down from Austin and the guy has a bag of apples, pretend apples grow, and say, I'd like to trade my apples for some beef. Why not?
Well, that's opening Pandora's box again, isn't it?
Well, there has always been a certain amount of trade between tribal communities, whether it was for feathers or different kinds of beans or pottery. There's always been trade between tribal communities.
I find less difficulty with that. You see, if you're trading apples for steaks, then you have equality. But if you're trading apples for cellular phones, the deal is a little bit different than. So you're trading equal resources.
So in other words, in Honduras, for example, where they've just suffered a big natural disaster, we really should not help them if they don't have anything to trade? Or you can only trade... I mean, because we would be hurting them to be helping them. Trying to figure this out. I'm just thinking of like think of the wildlife that was just devastated by what happened there. Not just the humans, but I mean everything. Suffering from 100-mile-an-hour winds or whatever. There's a real. And our first reaction is send all of this food down there. So how do you view a problem like that?
Well, the disaster that occurred there was not a disaster produced by overpopulation.
Okay.
To me, this is the same as people will say, well, what about, suppose the family next door to you is hungry. Wouldn't you give them food? Yes, I would. But that's not the same thing at all. We are not in an area of famine. Our problem is we're not overpopulating this area. Our carrying capacity, we haven't begun to reach our carrying capacity in this area. So someone starving next door is quite a different deal than people starving in North Africa. I don't really know what has happened in Honduras. I know there's been a disaster, but I don't know what the effects of that are. If it has been denuded of vegetation, then its carrying capacity is right now very low indeed. Yeah, and we may depends on what can we reasonably expect them to get back to normal. If it's a matter of they will never get back to normal, then for us to take on the obligation to keep them at a population that they can no longer, that the carrying capacity of their region will no longer support, as Dr. Thornhill pointed out in our last meeting, we are making a dependent there. If my neighbor is hungry, I definitely don't want them to starve to death. At the same time, by no means do I mean to make that my neighbor a permanent dependent on me.
In primitive societies, in the tribal context, you're right, there's no welfare, there's just a mutual interdependence. If a person has a broken arm, that doesn't mean his arm's always going to be broken. He might need a little bit of help for a while, and then he becomes productive again.
Yeah. And they usually had, the tribal life was so productive for people that they had no difficulty keeping people who were not productive, so that they did keep, archaeologists have shown that they have kept people who were retarded, and they have kept people who were born without arms and legs, things like that. They didn't have any problem with that because they had so much abundance, so it wasn't taxing on them to do that. But if they ever became taxed, it might be different.
I understand the idea behind the tribal relationship, and I think that's very interesting. What's not clear to me is how you create tribal relationships in large populations, like Houston, 3 million people. It seems to me that what happened with the tribes wasn't just a function of, although it probably included the worldview, it's hard to say which came first. Was it the population increase that came before the worldview changed, or the other way around? And I guess it doesn't matter too much, but I am really curious in understanding better how you can have tribal relationships in very large communities.
A group of 3 million or 300,000 people even is not a tribe.
Yes.
A group of 10,000 flamingos is a flock, because that's the way they have evolved. They have evolved in large groups. They have evolved societal systems that work for large groups. Humans were not in those sorts of situations. What evolved for humans and what worked for humans for millions of years was a tribal setting, which has always been under 60 or 80 people. Mm-hmm. You know, 100 people is getting a little large for a tribe, and usually they'll bud off another tribe from that. So when you talk about a tribe of 3 million people in Houston, that won't work. No. Give it up right now. It won't work. But we're talking about neighborhoods becoming tribes.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked
and we're not talking about tribes that are going to go feudal against the tribe next door necessarily. That's not part of the requirements. It's not part of the definition of a tribe. So we don't have to go to war with the neighborhood next door. We don't have to be gangs. But you do have to establish interdependencies with other people that have a like mind, so that there is some sort of mutual support.
So what does it mean then to draw this boundary? We talked about that last time.
Resources.
You know, say, yeah, we draw a boundary
it's
around.
Food resources we're talking about.
And how, I'm just trying to envision how that would work in neighborhood tribes, let's say. I guess you could have your own community gardens, so you could have
Or the farmers from outside of Houston would bring everything to a central location. It would be distributed to neighborhoods. I don't know. There could be 1,000 ways of doing it.
There's no necessity for the tribe, each individual tribe, to be entirely self-sufficient. There isn't that implication.
Right.
If the resources, and there were also, I think it has to be realized that the Navajo were not 60 people. The Navajo was a nation of tribes, of tribal units. And there were many thousands, I have no idea what the top number of Navajo were. But within the Navajo nation, they had their resources, and they didn't go to the Hopi, as I said, and say, "Oops, our population has doubled. Can you sell us some food?" They had to stay within their area and deal with their resources. But there were many tribal units within that nation, and so it was a tribe of tribes, if you like. And I'm sure that there probably was trading of resources of all kinds.
Some clans would be artisans, and other clans would be much better at growing a particular kind of food, so there would be trade among them. So you wouldn't need every neighborhood to have a neighborhood garden.
No.
That wouldn't be necessary. But you might have a neighborhood that just by chance happens to be a whole bunch of engineers, and they might get called upon by the neighboring neighborhood when a bridge needs repair. I don't know. I mean, but there are so many ways that this could pan out. And as Ishmael has suggested, we just need to be inventive. And as long as we get stuck in this deep rut of the way we've done things all along in our developed world, we won't be able to see those choices, those inventive routes.
In my next book, in Beyond Civilization, I stressed the point that we're none of us surprised to learn that a troop of baboons is a social organization that works for baboons, and that a flock of geese is a social organization that works for geese, and that a band of gorillas is a social organization that works for gorillas. What I've made the point is that the tribe is exactly the same thing. The tribe is a social organization that works for humans, and it worked for humans. It came to us through natural selection. This was what did work over the millions of years it took us to become humans. We became humans in tribal organizations. So we know that that is a system that works for humans. What we have replaced that with is a hierarchical system, which people at the top like very much, and the people in the middle like somewhat, and the people at the bottom don't like very much at all, but they have to put up with it, they think. And so always, I'm not trying to say what people should do, but I'm trying to get them to go back and realize that we don't have to reinvent. We don't have to invent a way that works for humans. We have that as a gift from natural selection. We have to go back and understand why it worked for humans, and to study it the way that ethologists study the way that a flock works, or the way that a troop works, and then to begin to say, well, how we know that works, and we know this doesn't work. So how can we begin to use these ideas to rethink the way we're living now? That's what Ishmael means by being inventive. So I don't have, by any means, I don't have all the answers, anything like that, nothing remotely like all the answers, and I don't expect we will have the answers for a long time. We have to begin looking at them.
If I may, I think one thing that may be puzzling, and I'm beginning to see it very clearly, that if I'm right, what you're saying is you're not trying to get people to go back to living in small shacks or wearing loincloths or grass skirts or something. We can still have all the technological things, the toys, the games, the pleasures and comforts of modern life. You're talking about how we interact, how one gets access to these things, how one works. And I would use your little charts with the make products, get products, or give support and get support. So it's more the style of the interaction than the level of technology. Correct?
Yeah. What we have right now is a system whereby kids get out of school and they must enter our economic system. And I hear from them, I hear from a lot of them, and I hear from ones who are very angry at the prospect that we are giving our children. They say, you guys are saying to us, before we can have a life, we've got to save the world. You didn't have to save the world, but it's up to us to save the world. Now we have got to drop everything. We can't have fun anymore. We've got to save the world first, and then have fun, if there's any time left. And this is because we have this totalitarian approach to the way we have organized ourselves. Everyone without exception gets out of school with no survival value at all and must immediately, unless he has parents or someone who will support him or her, get a job. So they, and there they are. Now they're stuck for the rest of their lives, is making a living, getting it together, and so on. So what I explore in my next book is a different approach that will enable people to not necessarily go in that direction if they will think tribally. The tribe I've roughly defined as a group of people, non-hierarchical, an egalitarian, democratic group that is engaged in making a living together. They don't necessarily live together. It doesn't matter whether they live together or not. Tribes were egalitarian. They had chiefs very often, or elders or something like that, who were not a hierarchy. We're not lords. We're not royalty, but we're basically the same as everybody else. And so I say that we have a good example of how tribes work in the circus. The circus is a tribe, or you might see it as a tribe of tribes. And within the tribe, the circus has a boss, of course, but people in the circus recognize that the boss is another job, and it's not necessarily the best job. It may get the best salary, or it may not get the best salary either. Probably the stars get more money than the boss. And so they recognize they must have a boss, but the boss is not the lord and master that they must kowtow to. That's a very tribal model. And that if people will think of approaching it this way, and I give many examples in that book of people getting together and working tribally to make a living, instead of immediately figuring out how to get plugged into what I call pyramid building. We are still doing exactly the same things as the workers of ancient Egypt, except that our pyramids are now being built for Bill Gates and Sam, what's his name, of Walmart. But we're still building those pyramids, and it's time for us to try something new.
I was going to ask about the culture itself, that what we call civilization is distinct from the human race. What do you see in the civilization that merits being saved? If we march beyond civilization, what would you see of value that the tribes should attempt to incorporate from this 10,000 years of hierarchical achievement?
Oh, I think that will take care of itself through natural selection. The people who like doing what we're doing, the people who are very successful at it, are definitely going to continue it. And I have nothing against them continuing it, because there is no one right way for people to live. The point is that the rest of us should have an opportunity to live the way we want to live and not work on the pyramids. It is my feeling that Karl Marx got off on this track of saying, well, we shouldn't be building the pyramids for these people, Bill Gateses and so on. What we should do is build the pyramids for ourselves. But the fact is that people don't want to build. Some people want to build pyramids, but not everybody wants to build pyramids. I don't want to build a pyramid. Most people want smaller and more amusing things to do than to build these goddamn pyramids. And so I think that his whole idea of workers going out there and saying, oh, we're not going to work for you anymore, we're going to work for ourselves, doing the same thing. No, I don't think so. Because that isn't what most people want. I know, I hear from them, and they're just crying out. They just cannot see going into this work and continuing to do what their parents did. They're just absolutely fed up with it. And we have to open up the world for them. But those who want to continue it will continue it, and I wish them all the best in the world, and everyone should have the opportunity to do what suits them, and hold on to as much as they want to hold on to. If you're crazy for electronics, I wouldn't want to take it away from you. And I know I'm not going to give up my word processor. Does that answer your question?
So, but you are in favor of the human race being saved?
Yeah. Believe it or not, people can get very hot on this issue. People will ask, what is the value of the human race and why should it be saved? And my answer is, what is my answer? To me, it's
Filling
like
us with confidence here.
It's like, well, you're living in a house and the house starts to burn down. Well, do you have to have explained to you why you should run outdoors and not get burned alive? What is the value of your life? I don't see why I should have to justify the value of the human race. I don't know what the value. I just feel that I would. There's no reason why the human race should be terminated after 3 million years and 10,000 years of a glorious flowering. I think civilization is wonderful. I think I admire its achievements, but I think it would be a terrible pity for the human race to disappear when we could live for millions of years more, and indeed billions of years. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't live for billions of years. And I definitely hope that it does, but I can't really give you any justification for that. I can't justify mosquitoes. I don't think I have to. I don't see why they need justification. They're there, God bless them.
This going back to the population business, I wanted to ask a question and see if there's an apparent contradiction here in terms of
the idea of more food, more population. That's sort of a biological given. But if that's true, why is it in societies, particularly ours, we see a lot of the segments of so-called minority groups which are characterized as having very large families even in these times, and yet at the same time are living in poverty, which one would think would equal less access to food?
And the question is, I'm not sure I understood.
Well, the question is this a contradiction of that notion that if there's more food, there will be more population, therefore if there's less food, there would be less population?
I think I can answer this.
Yeah.
The third level of social organization that really resists population growth is not necessarily spread evenly across the society, and it will be very well engaged and enmeshed in some parts of our civilization in the United States, for example, but very loose and very unsupported and very non-integrated into other parts of our society and our United States. And so those groups where it is still catching up with them are still going to be in the demographic trap. So it's not necessarily the case that the entire country is going to be moving along at the same pace on its move through this demographic trap. Segments or pieces of this group may be further ahead than others. And so there may be groups that are that have less access to the societal support structure and the tight controls of society. Well, controls. The third level of stuff that lays over top of the biological things.
Well, I think I could say. I mean, I could have had 12 children, but I would be much poorer I would have had to have been much poorer all that time when I was bringing up 12 children, but it would have been possible to do. The problem was not that there wouldn't have been enough food to give birth to 12 children. It's that their quality of life would have been much different.
Yeah, I think maybe I haven't expressed there seems to be an apparent contradiction. If indeed, if there's less food, there will be lower population. Why is it in certain segments of minority groups, inner city areas, we tend to see a lot of very large families? Hispanic barrios seem to produce large families. Many of the black families are large at the poverty level, not in the middle class. But this would seem to be a contradiction, because by being more in poverty, there should be less food, therefore less population.
No,
but they're
not
spending
necessarily.
less of their resources on the things that we spend our resources on, which is the pursuit of more electronics or more CDs or a new car or something else. They're spending all of their resources on food just to survive. As they get further along as this third level becomes more and more firmed up, they will begin pursuing these other interests at the expense of resources going into food.
Yeah, the very fact that the children are there is a clear indication that there is food there. They couldn't be there if there wasn't food there. They'd be dead.
Daniel, I have a question regarding predictions, and with us approaching 2K, there's quite a few of them coming up. And this particular one has to do with population. You've alluded to the amount of people that Mother Earth can afford. So how do you know that there can't be 12 billion of us here on the planet, or 24 billion, or 100 billion?
Probably I will take a shot at that, and probably Dr. Thornhill will also. I know it only intuitively, having lived for quite a while and having seen the remarkable deterioration in life among us as we become so crowded and non-material resources begin to disappear, space, opportunity, things like that. And I just can't conceive that even if we could survive biologically, that to live in a world of 12 billion people, I think, would not be a pleasant experience. And I must ask, why would you want to have 12 billion people? Even if it were possible, why would anyone want to have 12 billion people? What is it that we gain considering what we lose? We know that those 12 billion people, the mass, the biomass that is needed to make those additional 6 billion people must come from our neighbors in the community of life. So as we gain, they of necessity lose. We can only get that biomass from them, from our neighbors in the community of life, including whole species of them, as we destroy their habitat in order to increase our own resources. Alan?
I have two things to answer that with, and the second one has a caveat, so help me to remember to throw in the caveat. The first thing is more intuitive, like your response was. Imagine any problem on the planet, any place, anything that comes to mind first, whatever problem is forefront in your mind right now, and then double the number of people involved in that problem. Does the situation get better? Or does it remain the same? Or does it get worse? And so Daniel's question of, would we really want to double the number of people on the planet, I think is a good one. What do we gain by that compared to what we lose, which is my second point. is yes, we could support 12 billion people on this planet. I suspect we probably could. But it would be at the expense of every other living thing on the planet. Now the caveat. I got through it quick enough I didn't forget. The caveat is, yes, we could probably survive with 12 billion people. We might be able to support more than 12 billion people if we could be assured, if we were sure, and if it were the case that the support system that is the planet Earth wouldn't collapse as we slowly pulled the bricks out of the building. In other words, yes, we can convert all of the biomass on the planet to human mass, but at some point, the lungs are going to stop working. The ability of the Earth to recycle air and put oxygen back into the atmosphere, to get CO2 out, to clean the water, to cycle nitrogen and carbon. All of these systems will eventually begin to break down because at the moment there is a tightly interwoven mechanism that is this entire planet that makes these things work. And it requires a large number of systems to make it all work. And as we start to deconstruct these systems, they will probably go along just fine. Just like pulling bricks out of the building will not cause the building to fall immediately. But at some point, we're going to pull enough bricks out of one section of the building that we're going to see a catastrophe. Half the building's going to collapse. Or we're going to pull out some really key issues and the building's going to topple. So what we are really doing is undermining the foundation of life on Earth by converting the biomass into human mass. So yeah, we could probably support 12 billion, but there's that caveat.
Yeah.
Let
And
me ask one thing. In the periods where we've had these mass exterminations before, like not just the meteorite 65 million years ago, but like the Permian period, something like that, are we really, are we our own meteorite? In other words, if we're on the order of magnitude greater
Yeah, but
than,
we're about 40 million years too early.
I'm trying to get an idea about, that's not what's going to happen when we have 12 billion people, but now, aren't we already experiencing the ecological holocaust now? Isn't that exactly what's happening? So that the rainfall in Nicaragua really is a result of El Nino and global warming, which is a result of overpopulation, or the break off of the huge ice sheet in Antarctica is a result of global warming, or the increase in the methane coming out of the permafrost in the polar regions is a result of global warming. So we have more cars that we are producing, or we're getting the Chinese to produce more electricity. Isn't that just what we're experiencing now? It's not something that's going to happen. It is happening. Isn't that?
Some of us would agree with you, and some of us would say it's well on its way. But there's enough people that are buying into the idea that all we need to do is X and we'll be fine, that we don't have a consensus yet. There's enough people out there that are saying all we need to do is increase our efficiency.
Or get
Redistribute the food better.
Hydrogen fusion, for example.
Get hydrogen
or
fusion.
Solar power.
All we got to do is get solar power and everything will be fine.
Right.
Well, this is what Mother Culture tells us, is that we don't want to dismantle what we've got. We don't want to stop pedaling our flying machine. We just have to pedal faster, pedal better, take fewer breaks, stop taking vacations. I mean, if you want a better life nowadays, you'd better not be taking vacations.
Yeah. Well, so that the technological fix, which is a part of the Mother Culture's inherent message, is as great as the heroin or any other kind of fix, that you just have to have more and more of it to keep the plates in the air, keep
it certainly seems that way.
Squirrel cage moving. Yeah.
Well,
It certainly seems that way.
Is it, in a way, that the Earth as a system has a tremendous self-regulating feature to it? And it's what you were talking about before. Eventually you pull out the bricks and the system rebalances itself.
At a higher entropy level, yes.
Exactly. Is it the planet Earth really has nothing to fear from us?
Not in the slightest.
Whether we're here to enjoy it or not is a real question.
And whether we want to take, a third of the life on the planet out with us. Do we not have the responsibility, if we've heard that word a lot of times here, do we not have the responsibility towards millions of species on the planet? If we're going to talk about millions of humans, let's talk about millions of entire species. If we're going to talk about responsibility, let's go global here and think about it in the big picture.
I wrote this fable today. In the public square, there appeared a group of strangers who were sitting around, and each of them had a knife, and each of them was busily stabbing himself or herself. And the townspeople came around and looked at them in amazement and watched this pool of blood spreading out from them. And someone said, "Don't you realize that if you keep doing this, you're going to bleed to death?" And the people who were stabbing themselves said, "Well, I think you're being overly pessimistic here. Don't you think it's possible that some new coagulant is going to be invented before that happens?" And you'll hear this very often, that we are being pessimistic and that some new technological breakthrough is going to come along and somehow or other make what we're doing to ourselves okay. And that's not going to happen. The reason they were bleeding was not because they lacked a coagulant. They were bleeding because they were stabbing themselves. And we're in the process of destroying the earth because we're becoming too numerous. And
and we're also becoming very efficient at doing that.
Oh God, yes, indeed. Yeah.
The rates of deforestation are not going down in the world. The rates of species extinction are not going down.
That's what I'm saying.
They're going
more
up.
and more efficient.
Yeah. And the number of people being added to the planet per unit time is not going down. It's going up. I mean, I said before that roughly every second that passes, we add an additional 3 people. And someone earlier said, imagine if those 3 people were ahead of you in the movie line. That's a way to sort of bring it home to you, right? You're trying to get a cup of coffee, and every second, 3 more people appear in front of you. There it comes home to me, right? I have a real problem with that.
You like movies.
I like coffee. And it's not that we have to overcome this problem of 3 people being added every second. It's that we have to overcome that right now. And next year, it's going to be 3.5 people per second. And 3 years after that, it's going to be 4.5 people per second. The problem's getting larger. And for us to say that what we need is a technological fix for it is always putting technology in a catch-up mode in a race it can never win. It is always going to be behind us because our population is always expanding. There's a favorite saying by economists, led by a famous one who recently died. His claim was that all of the problems in our past have been solved by ideas. Every problem we've ever had in the past has been solved by ideas, and ideas are always coming from the minds of humans. When we have more and bigger problems, what we need are more humans, so we can get more ideas. And so his mission, and this was a well-respected, world-renowned economist, Julian Simon, his comment was what we need to be doing is fueling the population growth as much as we can. Grow that population as quickly as possible, because it will be from the minds of the new people that the solutions spring. And of course, in a capitalistic society where we want to grow our markets, that's good stuff. That's an economist with an infinite worldview, right? An infinite resource worldview is going to certainly say that.
Well, and of course it all works. up to a point. We just don't know where the point is. Where's the straw?
It might be behind us.
Yeah.
I can't resist making a comment about that. It seems to me that it's such a low level of evolution for human species to always be in the reactive mode, which is what you're describing, I think. We're waiting for a problem to occur so we can solve it, rather than ask, what do we want? Which seems to me to be a higher form of, being more evolved as a species, which seems to me really is at the heart of this. I mean, growing quantity here is not very interesting, but certainly quality would be. So, just a plug.
What is it that we want to have happen? I would like to have a longer vacation every year, but it seems like every year the time that I can spend on vacation is less and less. I would like to have a higher quality of life, and I'm sure everyone would like to have a higher quality of life. So how do we achieve that?
There are, I'm sure, people who would say to you, look, maybe this is a manifestation of our
Destiny as human beings. Rattlesnakes bite things and inject them with venom, and we chop down rainforests. Why not? It's just fulfilling our destiny, and perhaps it's what we're really supposed to be here for. Isn't it not just natural?
Yeah. Of course, there's no definitive way to argue this from first principles or anything like that. I go to history and say that human beings lived on this planet without doing this for 3 million years, and that only one culture of all the cultures that we've known that have ever lived here has ever done this. People will ask, yes, but isn't it true that our ancestors hunted other species into existence?
Extinction.
Into extinction, yes, thank you. But of course, they were not deliberately hunting them into extinction. They didn't know that they were hunting them into extinction. And they certainly wouldn't have hunted them into extinction, because what in the world would they gain from doing such a thing to destroy their own food base? So whenever they did that, that was by error, not by inclination. Whereas we are not hunting the rainforests into extinction. The animals that are dying out in the habitats that we're destroying, we aren't hunting them in order to eat them. We're doing this out of sheer greed and carelessness. But that isn't a characteristic of humanity. It is characteristic of our very, very strange culture. It's been one of the themes I've been pursuing, is to make people understand how very strange we are in the world. Not how typical we are, not how fated we were to become this way, but how very peculiar we are. And one of our great peculiarities among all life is the total abandon with which we are working for our own destruction.
I get another image that I feel very much that what you have given to me, at least in reading of the books, is you've kind of allowed me to go up on into the wheelhouse of the Titanic. We may be on the Titanic, but at least I know I can go up to the
wheelhouse of the Titanic and perhaps steer this sucker around that iceberg, whereas Mother Culture would like me to stay down in steerage and walk around going, they say it's going to be okay.
Yeah. They're sending a pilot from another boat.
Yeah, we're waiting for the pilot from another boat.
Expect it any time now.
We're just waiting for that invention that will make us iceberg-proof.
Yes. Yeah.
But the thing is that good things are happening. We still carry a lot of baggage, and I guess what is it that keeps the baggage dominant? This love of authority, the unwillingness to have enough self-respect for ourselves to be able to question from time to time, and
it is a peculiarity of our culture which has as one of its fundamental policies that there is one right way for people to live, and we have it. It cannot be bettered. And so people will put up with all of this because they are absolutely convinced that it cannot be bettered. Whereas, as I've used the examples before, the Olmec and the Maya and people like this knew that living in this way, the way that we're living, in this hierarchical way, with the people at the top having a wonderful life and the people in the middle having a pretty good life and the people in the bottom having a rotten life, they knew that this was not the best way, because they remembered and could see people around them living the old way. And when they got fed up with this, they went back to it. And we hang on to it because we are convinced that we can't possibly improve on it. We are convinced that civilization was humanity's first and last invention. Cannot be another invention. This is it. We cannot do anything but continue to do this, no matter how much it pains us, no matter how much we suffer, even if it leads to catastrophe. We must continue. This is an oddity, another one of the very great oddities of our culture.
I am really, really pessimistic about this. I don't know how in the world we're going to get 6 billion people convinced to not grow anymore. That's incredible feat. If anybody could do that, I don't know how they're going to do it. How anyone's going to do it.
I have taken it as a strange mission to promulgate the idea of changing people's minds. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why people have a hard time getting behind such an idea is that it strikes them as being so slow. And so I did finally sit down and actually work out what I was talking about on paper. And at this point, probably 2 million people have read Ishmael, we'll say 1 million. And if each of those 1 million were to reach one person next year, there of course would be 2 million. And if each of those 2 million were to reach one other person in the following year, there would be 4 million. But this is incredibly slow. Except that if you sit down and do the arithmetic, you will find out that it will take 12 years at that rate for everyone on the planet to have a changed mind. 12 years. And so changing minds is the fastest way, the fastest thing that can possibly happen is to change people's minds about what is happening on this planet. Nothing can be done faster than that. No government can move faster than that. No new set of laws can be made faster than that. Changing minds, if people will take it as a responsibility and say, there are people around me, and many of them are listening, many of them are looking, many of them are not having a good life. They are ready to listen, they're ready to hear. And I provide tools. That's all I do. All of my books are tools for people to use. And I don't care whether you buy them. I'm not trying to sell books. Use the same book over and over again. I don't care how you do it. Use library books. Steal them from the library. I don't care. And if you come up with better tools, that's fine too. I don't mean that these are the only tools you should use. Some tools to change, to get this stuff out, and that there's just nothing more important than this. And it as difficult as it seems, it can happen if people will take it as a responsibility and and see that, and people have. It's been tremendous to see the growth of support for my ideas, which started at 0 in January of 1992, and just by word of mouth, each person telling the people around him or her, and it just grew. It's grown like wildfire. So I know it can be done. I know it can happen very rapidly, and it is happening very rapidly. I'm sure of that. And what you're getting now, this is physicist, German physicist. His name will come to me by the time I finish talking about it. Who said that new ideas are never spread by conversion, by going around and buttonholing people and saying, this is why relativity is true. Rather, what happens is that the old opponents of new ideas die out, and the next generation comes up, and they already know all this stuff. And so that the people who right now are the ones who will not listen, they're dying out. They're going to die out. And the kids are going to come up, and all of this is going to be old stuff to them. They're going to know this stuff. And I don't care whether they know it came from Daniel Quinn or from any book that I wrote, so long as they see things a different way, because that's our salvation. And people will ask me, well, yes, but suppose we did have 6 or 8. By that time it would be 8 billion people who are thinking a different way. What would they do? What would they do?
And what you're talking about is a total chaos, breakdown of world authority.
Yes, thank God. And at that point, I have to say that no paradigm can ever predict the next paradigm. And people in one paradigm may think they can predict the next paradigm, but they can't. And the people in the Middle Ages couldn't have predicted the Renaissance. I know I've said this at another meeting, but it serves. It can be said again. And I say again that if humanity is still here in 1,000 years, it will be because people are thinking a different way. Because if they go on thinking this way, there won't be people here in 1,000 years. I don't know what they'll be thinking, but they will definitely be thinking a different way, and what they'll be doing. I know they'll know this. If they're going to live in 1,000 years, if there are going to be people here, this will be child's play. Everybody will know this. This will be obvious. No one will argue with such a thing if we're still here in 1,000 years, because we won't be unless people do see this. It's as simple as that.